Welcome to Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Geri Simon, a League member and your host. Each program, we talk about important public policy issues. We hope you'll discuss those same issues, and then at election time, you'll be ready and willing to go vote. This program, our topic is our legislative update, the first one of 2018, and to talk about bills and before the unicameral legislation being considered, we have our highly unpaid lobbyist and for the League of Women Voters, Peggy Adair. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, this is the short session for the unicameral, and that started January 3rd, and is that right? And goes till April 18th?
Mid-April, I think, yeah.
Mid-April, okay.
Yep.
So only 60 days as opposed to 90 days last year. Okay.
Right.
And that's because, why do we do it that way? Again, remind viewers.
Tradition.
Tradition,
Yes.
okay.
It's basically, it's a 2-year legislative session, and this
Right.
this is the tail end of the second year. And it's 60 working days, so it's not exactly 60 days, but 60 working days. So that's what it'll be due.
Okay. And then we've had a lot of bills introduced, as is typical in a session. A couple hundred, I think, have been introduced. And then senators are allowed to designate a priority bill. And they have until February 20th to do that this year.
Right.
So do you want to explain again to our viewers, what does that mean to have a priority bill for a senator?
Each senator can introduce one priority bill, and it's especially important, I think, in the short session, because you only have 60 days. They're in a rush to get things done. And because we do have carryover bills from last session, there are still some bills that were brought into this session from last year that those senators are also interested in passing. So they're scrambling to get a lot done in that short amount of time, and the priority bills will be of extra importance because those will be the ones that the speaker will make sure that at least they'll get one floor debate.
Okay. And we would like our viewers to know, too, that you can find a lot of information about bills online. We have a graphic that we can throw up on the screen that you can go to nebraskalegislator.gov, and then there's a bill tracker. And nebraska.gov/bill tracker, and that's up on the screen. You can put in any bill that you want to follow and get email updates. Is that how it works?
Right.
Right. The bill tracker. So
there is a wealth of information on the Nebraska Legislature's website. I really urge people to go to that website if they want to find out anything. If they want to find out about their own senator, if they want to find out about other senators and what their bills are, you can kind of get a feel for a senator, finding out what bills that they have introduced. And it's just lots of helpful information on that website. Very user-friendly, very easy to use. Lots of different ways to find the bills and find out what's going on. Okay,
and you can watch NET, Nebraska Educational TV. You can watch hearings, too, if you want to do that.
Yes, and there's always something really interesting going on. So you can kind of switch around among the hearings, too, and see what's going on that day.
Okay, well, we want to remind our viewers that the League, we never endorse or oppose political parties or candidates, but we do study issues and we take action on them, and hence we have you as our lobbyist working on issues in the unicameral. We have senators who have their priority bills, but the League also goes through the list of all those bills and chooses some priorities that we are going to focus on, whether we oppose or support a particular legislation. So that's one of the things we want to talk about this evening is those bills that the League is either supporting or not.
And it's a difficult process because, again, there's so many bills that come out, and we have, in Greater Omaha, we have about 200 League members, and they all have their passions, they all have their interests, and it's so hard to narrow it down to just a few bills because we do have so many people that are interested in so many issues. So even though we might choose these priority bills, that doesn't mean that we're ignoring some of the other bills that are coming up, because a lot of our members are, we have people who are interested in water, we have people who are interested in wind energy, and so we do follow a lot more bills than what we choose just for our priorities.
And we do choose to say we would support or oppose certain bills even though we're not prioritizing them. Okay.
Absolutely.
And can take action.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's start with carryover from 2017. What are some of the priority, what are the bills that we're looking at and focusing on?
Let's see. Voting rights, we had a pretty simple bill. It was asking that the Secretary of State be notified when felons have completed their sentence, so that they will know automatically 2 years after that they are automatically eligible to vote.
Okay.
I don't know that bill is going to go anywhere, and a simpler solution would just be simply to drop that 2-year wait. What we have in Nebraska now is if a felon has completed his or her sentence, entire sentence, including parole, then 2 years after that, they are automatically allowed to register and vote, just like any other citizens. They don't have to. They don't have to show any paperwork. They don't have to prove that they have 2 years out. However, that because of that 2-year wait, it just is very confusing for a lot of people. They might not even realize that they are eligible to vote. So we're trying to. Senator Wayne introduced this bill. He's trying to get make it a little bit more automatic so that the people would know. Again, I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's a very good bill.
Okay. And last session, he did have the bill that got rid of the 2-year waiting period. Once a felon had completed their debt to society,
Right.
they could have their right to vote back immediately.
Yeah.
That did get passed, but the governor
Yeah.
vetoed it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
So.
Do you think that'll come back, that particular bill?
I think it will eventually, obviously not this year, again, because there's just not time. It's such a quirky thing that Nebraska did. We're the only state who has that kind of an oddball thing attached to the felon voting bill. And it was just because at that time, that was the only way we could get it passed, was to get enough people to sign on.
Right.
That's what we had to do. So it's, we've been trying to get rid of it ever since.
Okay.
But it's difficult.
Okay. And then, do you want to talk about LB 68? That's the one about, they call it a gun bill, preemptive weapon carry bill that was adopted.
Yes, Senator Hilger's bill. Okay, so what this is trying to do is say that local control is great in Nebraska when you want when there's something that your local people want to do, like school boards. But local control, when it has to do with guns and gun rights, they're not so crazy about that. And I guess for instance is Omaha and Lincoln have some local ordinances that are stronger than what the state has as far as protecting people from providing for gun control. And there are certain people who want to not allow local folks to have an ordinance against or for gun control. And so they're trying to say that, well, if the state has a law, then a local entity cannot come and make a more difficult law to prevent gun violence. I'm not sure where this is going to go either. It's interesting how these things kind of, go in waves. And again, because there's not a whole lot of time in this session, I don't know. If it becomes a priority bill, it could move on, and certainly the League opposes it.
Okay.
Because the League does have a position on gun control.
Right, exactly. Okay. Well, let's move on to public education. There's LB 295, and talk about that one.
Yeah, that's a big concern because again, it's just kind of a back door into charter schools and vouchers that would suck money away from the public coffers and the public education and allow it to go towards private. The bill has, right now, it has a $10 million, a fiscal note that would take $10 million out of the general fund. And of course, that's of great concern to people in Nebraska because we are struggling with a budget like any other state is right now and trying to protect our public education. And the public education in Nebraska is doing well. And certainly compared to a lot of other states that are really struggling, we've always really promoted our public education and worked very hard. And so to have a bill like this where you would take $10 million away from public education, I think it's very dangerous and very thoughtless at this time. So the League is strongly opposing this bill, and we'll see. It's on select file now, and that's very concerning.
Okay,
because
that's the second reading then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the bill that some people know as the scholarship bill that allows you to donate toward a scholarship
Yes.
that would allow and typically a underprivileged child to go to a private school, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Or so they say.
Or so they say. But it's really, like what you're explaining, it would really deflect and defer tax dollars toward, you're because of those tax credits being given to the people who donate, you're foregoing tax dollars to do it. So it's really diverting tax dollars to private education.
Yeah, I love to have the comparison, and I can't remember if it was an ad or someplace where I saw it, where a person is saying, well, I don't really want to, donate to the public parks anymore because I want to go to my private club and I want to give all of my money to my private club, and therefore I shouldn't have to, provide money to the public parks. And that's kind of a comparison.
Right, okay. Then another one that's a carryover is LB 305 on worker rights.
This is a great bill. It's Senator Crawford's bill, and it establishes paid medical, paid family and medical leave for workers. It would most affect the lower wage earners and middle income wage earners who have a hard time, because right now we have unpaid medical leave for most families, but you can't take time off and not be able to get that income. So it's a great bill. There's a mechanism to pay for it. It's similar to the Social Security payment and workers' compensation payments. I'm very hopeful. It's still in committee though, and unless it becomes a priority bill, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's a super bill, and I certainly hope it moves forward.
Okay. Okay, well, let's move into the new legislation proposed for 2018. And the first one we wanted to talk about was LB 870. It's juvenile justice and mental health. Yes.
What has happened in Nebraska, and is very disconcerting, is a lot of the kids who are, particularly in Kearney and Geneva, that are our state-run institutions, are being held in solitary confinement, sometimes for days, sometimes for many, many days. And the issue is that many of these children are mentally ill, and that's pretty much the issue. And instead of dealing with their mental illness, they're just putting them into solitary confinement, which makes them even more mentally ill. So this bill is an attempt to stop that practice, or at least maintain as little of that as we possibly can. So, very hopeful about that one.
Okay, great. And then another one dealing with health, but women's health, is LB 944. Explain that one. And this is the Title X funding. If people have been reading about it recently, the governor has been proposing to restrict Title X funds for particular kinds of health clinics. So why don't you explain a little bit more?
And there's so much going on with this bill. First of all, it was heard in the Appropriations Committee, and it's a health bill, and should have been heard in Health and Human Services. And even the Appropriations Committee questions, like, what is this bill doing here? And what is this bill even doing in here? Because there's no need for it, first of all, because right now we are following Title X requirements, the federal requirements. There's absolutely no reason why we'd lose Title X funding. And there are things in this bill that are so ambivalent that it could cause health centers that are not even talking about abortion or referring for abortion or anything like that. It could cause them to lose Title X funding. It's just very ambiguous and very confusing, and I hope it doesn't go anywhere.
It's still in committee then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that leads to a question. You said there was a surprise that it was assigned to appropriations. How do the bills get assigned to the various committees? That come through the Speaker's office?
There's a referencing committee, and that has been of issue these last couple of years, because people are campaigning to get bills moved to certain committees for reasons. And for instance, would be a number of bills sometimes get sent to Government and Military and Veterans Affairs Committee instead of Judiciary, because Government Committee tends to be very conservative. The Judiciary Committee has attorneys on it, and they're much more measured in their deliberations. And so if you're wanting to get a more conservative bill passed and you try to get it into that government committee.
Okay. Okay. So Title 10, any sense, are you hoping it's going to stay in committee or just not be voted out?
I did listen to this hearing, and again, everybody on that committee was rather skeptical of A, why in the world are we hearing this in appropriations? Because it is a health bill, and B,
Right.
why do we need this bill? And even the proponents of it were saying that, they would ask some questions. Well, don't we follow Title 10? Well, yes, we do. So
There was a similar attempt last session, correct?
Yes.
With a bill that did make it to the floor that was voted down on kind of the same idea.
yeah.
Okay.
And Senator Chambers is not going to let this bill go anywhere, I guarantee you.
Okay. Well, let's move on to some that are about election and voting rights. And one of the big things that the league we're focusing on this year, nationally and in the state and locally, is redistricting. So there are sort of a package of bills, a trio of bills there. Why don't you talk about those?
Yeah, and redistricting is kind of at the root of all the evil. The 2010 was the last redistricting. The next one will be 2020 after the 2020 census.
Right.
And there's been just a lot of research and study and concern over gerrymandering and the issues that have caused such convoluted elections going on, and redistricting is at the bottom, at the crux of that. So there are a number of bills that have been introduced. So we have the carryover 216 from last year. We have 973 that talks about drawing the maps. 974, 975. We
Right.
kind of see those as a package. We have a feeling that the senators are probably going to get together and wrangle and try to get the best, hopefully the best things of each of these bills and move those bills forward as a package. I'm very hopeful that they'll get something ironed out this year. They really need to. I mean, this is 2018, and we have 2 more years before we have that the census and the redistricting. But time goes very fast,
Right.
and so we really need to work on that now.
So this trio of bills focuses more or less on the way the maps are drawn, in particular, and how they're done and using particular software, or who does that?
Yes.
Okay. And then 216, which we're still supporting, which is Burkhart's bill on
Right.
redistricting, that's the one that establishes an independent commission to
Yeah.
manage the whole process.
Yes.
So we would still like to see that one
Yes.
come out as well.
That would be great if we could do that. If, barring that, we hope we can iron out some things that will at least make it better.
Okay. Okay, great. So 973, 974, 975,
Right.
and then 216.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, well, let's move to the one that seems to come up every year. This is about the 8th iteration, I think. There's a couple of bills about
Yes.
voter ID, 1065 and 1066. So why don't you talk about each one of those?
Yeah. 1066 was heard today. I was very intrigued to find that these were not heard on the same day, 1065 and 1066. And these are both Moranti's bills, Senator Moranti, and I guarantee you he has a reason for not doing those on the same day. I just haven't quite figured out what that is yet. But 1066 was heard today, and he brought the Secretary of State from Missouri up to talk about this bill and how fabulous it was for the Missourians, and they had only had 400 people who had signed up for this photo ID, and that it didn't cost them any money, and everybody was happy and kumbaya.
Didn't cost the particular recipients money, but it sure cost the state money to do it.
Well, but he claimed that it cost a lot less than what they figured it was going to
I see.
cost. So he talked all about how fabulous it was. But there's a lot of opposition to this bill, and there were a lot of people who spoke very passionately about how a bill like this can affect disabled people and elderly people, people of color, low-income people, and how, yes, the ID itself might be free, but then you have to get the birth certificate, which can cost anywhere from $15 to $30 depending on where you were born, in order to get in order to prove that you were born, in order to get that idea. And it can take time to get these things, and some people don't even have them. And if they don't have them, they have to go to court to prove that they were born. So it becomes a lengthy, difficult process. So we are definitely opposing this
that
bill.
one.
Yeah.
And I understand also one of the flaws on this bill is that it was allowing some IDs, like student IDs, and the whole idea supposedly is to reconcile where a person lives to help
Right.
identify them. Those kinds of IDs don't have an address on them.
Right, right.
So,
the bill does say, it specifically says that when you come and you vote, that you have to show an ID that matches your name and the address. And you're absolutely right. Student IDs do not have addresses on them.
Okay. And then 1065, that's the one about electronic poll books? Is that,
Yes.
what's that one all about?
Yes, well, that's another, and maybe that's why it didn't come on the same day, because Senator Moranti claims that this is going to modernize our election process by creating electronic poll records instead of the written. And it requires that every person who is going to vote has to have a digital photo taken of themselves, and this digital photo has to be on file in the Secretary of State's office. And aside from the fact that we are always struggling with the voter ID laws in particular, this one I think is very concerning because of, to me, the safety measure. Who's going to have that in their cache? And once you have a digital photo, it's out there forever. And it's very concerning of issues of safety and privacy.
And hackability of the
Absolutely.
system, the software,
Absolutely.
the hardware.
Yes.
And cost.
Yes.
This would cost counties a lot,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So. I don't know, I think to me, I think it's a new idea, a new devious idea that Senator Moranti has come up with, but it does have a lot of problems with it. So we're definitely watching that one.
So for those who are saying that they're concerned about voter fraud, this might be this is a possibility that this kind of thing is where the fraud, not in terms of the person presenting to vote, but in the system or infrastructure.
Absolutely. There's there's
the hardware
that could be hacked so easily. It's very concerning.
Okay. And then we have, going into the human rights area, LB 1132.
Yeah,
So
a terrific bill. Senator Pansing Brooks has worked on this issue, worked on the issue of human trafficking with other senators and groups for years, and doing a spectacular job. This takes it a step further and says that if a person has been convicted of a sex crime, such as prostitution, and that person can show that that person was actually a victim of human trafficking, then they can have that record expunged. And our only concern with it is it's a cost issue for these victims because, again, they have to go to court, they have to provide documentation showing that they were victims of sex trafficking. So it's going to be difficult for them to take advantage of this if it should happen. But it is, the idea behind it is very good and very commendable. Okay,
great. And this particular bill we're going to be featuring as part of our legislative day. We always have a day the league goes to the unicameral and talks to our various legislators about particular bills that are of interest to us that we would like to see them support or oppose depending on the bill. So then this is one of those.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, it's just really hard to to pare it down to one or two bills because they're all interesting. That's for sure.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is anything on Medicaid that's sort of come through this year that we're seeing. In prior years, we've seen, quite a few proposed bills on doing something different with Medicaid. Anything on that, expanding it or not?
Yeah, and not much is going on this year, which is really interesting, and maybe it's because of our economic situation in Nebraska, and maybe it's because it's a short session and people are exhausted and maybe they're trying to focus on perhaps next year trying it again. It's a shame because we could have taken advantage of that 3 or 4 years ago and provided health care for so many more people at such a less cost than what we're doing now. So it's too bad.
Okay. And also wanted to ask you about, I think last year it came up at LR Legislative Resolution 6 on a convention of the states. And is that, have any chance of anything happening with that this year?
I haven't seen a lot of action on that. And I think it's again because of so many other things going on that some things have been pushed to the back burner, and I think this is one of them.
Okay.
I know several senators had expressed interest in that. The problem with the Convention of the States is then you get into this big dogfight, if you actually have it, which I seriously don't think we're going to, of exactly what we're going to do once we get there. And,
right.
It could be very different than what they're hoping for. Be careful of what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Okay. And one last thing, just a minute or so left to go, but it seemed last session you always get a vibe or a feel for what things are like in a session. Last session, a lot of people said it felt much more partisan, even though we have a nonpartisan legislature. How about this year so far? Is that still true, or are you feeling it's a little bit more back to the typical nonpartisan working together?
So far, I would say this year is better than last year. Last year was awful. There are always new senators, and when the new senators come in, I think they tend to be more partisan. They come in with an agenda and with an attitude, and then they see that things don't actually work that way. They're having to deal with Senator Chambers, and they find that rather disconcerting. But then all around, I would say better. Just better.
Okay. Great.
Not good, but better.
Okay. And again, we want to throw up our slide on letting people know where they can get information online for learning about bills and following those. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. And we'll do, I'm sure, another kind of a summary when the session ends too as well. Great. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Geri Simon, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues. And at election time, go vote, Omaha.